919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local shows, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. As the season turns to fall and the colors of the leaves begin to change, at least on Mount Lemon, it's great to connect with my peers, younger cats who are continuing the lineage of improvisational funk music. And my next cat is a guy who is really quite an accomplished player. His resume speaks for itself, but when you throw the book away and when you throw the charts away and it just comes down to feel and it just comes down to playing what you feel, this cat is at the leading center of rhythm sections, going back to cats like James Jamerson and Wilton Felder and Chuck Rainey. He's the new generation living in the digital world. Will Blades, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
How you doing, brother?
Good. There's some heavy names you named. I don't know if I'm there yet.
Well, let's talk. How did you get exposed to... how old are you, by the way?
I just turned 37.
Okay, so you're younger than me, which is how did you get exposed to cats like most people think of Wilton as a tenor sax player, but the dude got a bass. He was the funkiest bass player. Rainey was the funk master. How did you get exposed to those cats?
Well, just from checking out, I mean, it's funny to some of these older cats I got into through hip hop without knowing it. Hearing Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul, and then digging deeper into some of the music they were sampling. That was actually my first entry.
That was Can you give an example of a song? Because I know what Will Blades is referring to is the sampling that goes on amongst these hip hoppers. Do you know unconsciously what you were, one of the beats or one of the hooks that you were turned on to originally?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's so many. I mean, in one song there could be a few different samples that they put together. But I was exposed to like Jack McDuff and Lonnie Smith and Ronnie Foster and really James Brown, just like a real big mix of people.
When did it come into your consciousness that to actually go back and find out who was originally playing these riffs?
Well, I guess so. Essentially, I'll go back a little bit further. So I grew up playing drums and guitar before I got into playing organ, and I just, when the organ started speaking to me, I was getting more into funk, and at the time, Medeski, Martin, and Wood was hitting, and that really appealed because they were putting a lot of influences together in one pot.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have the meters thing, you had the sort of like 70s Miles thing in there, there's a hip hop thing in there, and it was like just checking out more music, and then some of it was just happenstance, like, oh wait, I remember hearing that song in this track that Tribe sampled, or some of it was seeking out stuff, but some of it was also I just happened to start digging deeper into that music, which was like soul jazz and a lot of the organ stuff.
Oh, I dig. I mean, I really dig what you're saying. Do you? I don't know how to exactly state this. It's just kind of coming off the top of my head, but do you feel like kind of obligation is the wrong word, because I realize you're still climbing the mountaintop. But I talk to so many of those cats. I mean, I've done multiple interviews with everybody I mentioned in that intro, Wilton and Chuck. Well, Jamerson I didn't, but Max Bennett. The list goes on, and it's like okay, like you go back to that time, and it's like, Well, those were the great. So the hip hop cats were sampling those, bass lines because they're, in some people's minds, it didn't get any funkier than that. To me,
Right.
the lineage, like, I mean, there was a lineage break at that point, and you can point to instruments being taken out of schools. You can talk about the drum track. You can talk but for somebody who's continuing, how do you try in your mind to continue to increase vocabulary as a bass player, a guy who is who's played a lot of percussive instruments? How are you trying to expand the vocabulary of music? Because it's like we have to continue the lineage, and you're right on the bandstand right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of, I think it's a matter of two things, is like accepting, well, I should say first, it's just digging into the history. And I've been fortunate to study with some great musicians of the past, like Lonnie Smith and bass player Herbie Lewis. And I just am trying to be true to history, really know the history, and also accept that I'm me in a different era. I didn't grow up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and there's these other influences, and there's a lot more music out here now, and so I feel like I need to also bring that to the table. So it's a matter of combining the history with combining my influences, whether it's hip hop or some of the rock music I grew up listening to as a kid. Just trying to incorporate everything and be true to that while maintaining the history. And I think some of my favorite musicians, just in general, regardless of style, like, are people that have a foot in the past while looking forward. And I think the ultimate example of that is Jimi Hendrix. As someone who, I mean, if you really know your history and you hear Hendrix, you can hear Hooker in his playing, you can hear Albert King in his playing, you hear all these different influences, yet he sounds so unique in himself. And I guess that's kind of the thing I'm looking for, is having that history in the foot in the past while still being real about who I am and what era I'm in.
Talking to Will Blades here on the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk. You just kind of blew my mind here. Please tell me. No, in the sense you just dropped a name that I didn't feel like there'd be any way for you at your age to be able to connect with him, was Herbie Lewis, because I don't think he's with us anymore. Is that right? He's gone.
Right. Yeah. So Herbie was an instructor at New College of California in San Francisco. I grew up in Chicago and did a year of college at Columbia in Chicago, and then took off for San Francisco and went to New College and met Herbie there. And it was just this real funky little liberal arts school with not many people in the music department, and Herbie was the guy.
That's awesome.
And,
that is awesome, dude. That man was I'm sorry I left him out, because I think he just played upright bass, right? I mean, he wasn't really an electric guy.
No.
Yeah. Continue.
So, yeah, he was a really important mentor for me in many ways. When I moved, I was still a guitar player, and that's what I was planning on doing, was playing guitar. And I had been dabbling in the organ a little bit, and my interest had started to go that way. And so when I got out there, for some reason, Herbie just had it in his mind that I was a piano player. And so I was trying to play guitar, and I was trying to play guitar, organ, and drums all at the same time, trying to practice, and he started getting pissed at me.
Why? Just taking on too much?
Yeah. It was starting to become more, I don't know, I was just becoming more passionate about. And I had gotten a gig playing at John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom Room doing happy hour. And so he was sort of the reason that I ended up with guitar to the organ. And he was also super influential as far as teaching me bass lines and stuff like that, and just in general trying to up my seriousness and my commitment to my music. And a lot of my history and knowledge came through him. He was there and lived through bebop and post-bop and played with Monk and hung with Coltrane all the time. So I have this really, I got this really firsthand view of what it was like and what the scene was like and the music and what people were thinking about and what people were into. And so Herbie really, he would always tell a lot of stories, and it was pretty incredible, man. It's funny because at the time it wasn't like a real methodical traditional school setting, and sometimes I get frustrated and be like, man, I just want to learn this stuff. But looking back as I'm older, I'm like, I just got the most real deal, kind of almost like education, and that's how those guys came up. They weren't coming up in college educated music schools for jazz. It just wasn't what it was. It was the music that they were into, that his peers were into, and it was just something you learned from records, and it was more of an oral thing, oral tradition.
I mean, this is why I love. I mean, how did you find that school, by the way?
From college handbook. The internet was.
That's like you have to consciously make a choice to go to some scrap iron school. I mean, it sounds.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's about scrappy. And then the Boom Boom Room, I think, was John Lee Hooker owned that place for a while. That was that was on the Divisadero, right?
It's on Fillmore.
It's on Fillmore. I mean, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Not far from Divisadero, but yeah, it's Fillmore.
But I mean. So you feel like you've always had an old soul in some ways? I mean, you've always that the oral traditions of jazz and the ability to just learn it on the bandstand. I mean, to me, it's like, is there a way for you to talk about how music is taught in academia? I often fly off the handle in my own way because I look at it and I say okay, well, Ron Carter and Billy Hart and Eddie Henderson and these guys all, we have very amicable relationships, and I've loved talking to these guys. But they're professors at Juilliard now, and and that's cool. And you got these mega institutions now that are cranking out these dudes with monster chops and huge technique. And then there's a lack of venues and things like that. But it's a twofold thing. Number one, the greatest players aren't necessarily the best teachers, and
right. I'm
also thinking okay, can Will Blades talk about, in a positive sense, for someone like me who lives in my Jake Feinberg Show bubble, what is? Can you talk about how musical language can be developed within academia? I mean, in the sense that you and Herbie did it at a really scrappy kind of school, and then ultimately you went out and played. You had this happy hour gig, but within the school construct, can you talk about how music can breathe, if it can breathe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it's hard to say because I never had that experience of going to a school like that. But I think if there are teachers like Ron Carter and Billy Hart and the people you mentioned, I think the right things will get taught because those dudes are the real deal, and they are of that era that Herbie was of.
That's right.
And I think if you have guys like that in the schools, hopefully the students will be learning the right stuff. And I would think that they would be, just based on who those guys are. But I guess from what I see is lacking in that is maybe just there's real world things that need to be taught that maybe aren't necessarily taught in a lot of schools, like how to have a good set list that has a good arc and keeps the audience entertained, and how to relate to the audience and how to do business. And like, it seems like there's these very real world concrete things that you need to survive as a musician, and I don't see them being taught necessarily. Maybe some schools are. I honestly don't know.
Do you think that is it possible to teach them in academia, or is it stuff that you can only, I just want you to go back to something, because I can't pull it up right now on my Facebook feed, but Will Blades had this, he's obviously he's been pounding the pavement and just singing for his supper for quite some time, and doing it right in the Jake Feinberg Show pocket. But you kind of had a transcendent experience. I think you got a chance to play with Bernard Purdie like earlier this year, maybe. Is that right?
Oh yeah, the post I wrote about him.
Yeah, can you talk? Because I really got off on that. I thought that because it was like what you're talking about, the things that you just said need to be taught. Seemed to be there seemed to be not an awakening, but you were able to pontificate on that based on a live gig. Can you talk about that experience, and then ultimately what you think the most important things you learned, and what other cats should learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, I used Purdie as an example on that post. It was more also about other musicians, like great musicians that I've played with too. But I've played with Purdie a bunch. And the reason I wrote that post was also asking what it's like to play with Purdie. And it made me, there was a post that I had been sort of, not even a post, because I hate to sometimes Facebook makes you think in certain ways, like, oh, I'm going to write about this on Facebook. I kind of hate that. But,
no, I'm telling you, I can tell you that as somebody who has all the perception and all the mind control that could exist has fallen off, obviously, with me. But I just thought what I thought you were writing on, like, first of all, the dude's doing it. It's not like he's not like writing a thesis. He's like,
right, of course.
I thought it was really articulate. So whatever you remember from that, just.
Yeah, well, so basically this cat asked me, what is it like to play with Bernard Purdie? Right. And there are certain things that I notice, not only with Purdie, and I use Purdie as an example, but not only with Purdie, but other, like, older, I would consider master musicians that I've had the opportunity to play with. And what I said was that essentially I'm trying to remember everything I said, sorry.
I'm going to go back to the post at some point too, because I'm trying to dig it up. But I just want you to.
Well, no. So essentially, what I was saying is that everything is coming from a very centered, relaxed place, both physically and mentally, which allows you to have the confidence to not force music. When you're younger, you're really trying to force the music out of you. And that's the wrong way to go about it. I think when you see guys like Purdie, he's just so relaxed and he's just flowing, and that's because he's not forcing it. He's relaxed and he's really centered. I think Bernard Purdie is like the perfect example of how to sit at your instrument. He's just like completely centered, great posture, but it's not like stiff posture. It's like just real. When you're playing from your center, it makes everything relax, and then you can just play. And that's one thing I really noticed with Purdie. I noticed with people like Johnny Vidakovich and Lonnie Smith and other cats that I've played with, is that they just don't force the music. They kind of relax into the music rather than trying to muscle the music. And that's the big difference I see with those guys, is just that they don't need to force the music out. They just let it happen. And it comes from more of a relaxed place. And I remember the other thing I said is that volume isn't energy.
Right.
And that's something I felt for a long time, is that I feel like people feel like they need to use volume to get over rather than music. And if you play really loud, it can kind of make up for some that might be lacking. And Purdy doesn't hit the crap out of the drums. He plays pretty light, but gets a real thumpy sound. And I also noticed that with James Gatson. I've never seen him play live, but when I've seen videos of him, he's just like not playing hard, but it's so funky and so thumping.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes drummers maybe think they got to pound the drum really hard to make it sound like it's thumping, but actually it's not that at all. You know, and you hear those, when I hear recordings of Clyde Stubblefield, it doesn't sound, I can tell from the tone of the drums, he's not bashing the drums, yet it's funky as hell, you know. And so that's the one thing I see, and I think that's partly has to do with age. When you're younger, you're just trying to get it out, and as you get older, you feel like you have less to prove, maybe. And I think the other thing is when you come from a relaxed place and you're not forcing the music, it makes playing with space so much easier.
How do you get to, I'm just asking to me, if you're at a relaxed place, it means you have a deep bag of tunes. You talked about the arc of a set, meaning you're not going to be, you can play a shuffle, you can play a ballad, you can play up tempo. To be relaxed though means you need to be secure with your playing. And,
right.
And it's like for younger cats, I mean, I've done about 4 or 5 interviews with Billy Cobham, and I've never asked him directly, but I actually feel that, he's not going to assume any guilt because of it, but I mean, really, he looked back at an album like Spectrum and Forward, and those drums, after a while, if you for someone like a student like yourself, you go back far enough and you listen to Idris Muhammad, and Jim Keltner, Gadsden, like those guys, like tasteful, not slamming the drums. But anybody who was caught on to quote unquote the fusion rock jazz, those drums started to sound like machine guns. So it's almost like people like, oh, well, that's how you have to play the drums. You have to play with massive power and all that aesthetic. Right. That aesthetic is only there if you go back far enough. So I just, I think it's great. How did you seek out the elder statesmen like Lonnie and those cats? Because I think it's about seeking. I mean, otherwise you're just going to be, seeking is, can you talk about how you even I gravitated towards those cats because of authenticity, and I wanted them to speak knowledge and just have fun. But for you as a musician, how did you find them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I was young enough and kind of in a way stupid enough to get in their space
a
little bit.
Love it.
Which I find that it's not true with everybody, of course, because everyone's different. But I find with a lot of the older cats are really open to sharing, and they want to see younger people succeeding and playing the music that they played and expanding upon it. And so with Lonnie, I saw him play at Yoshi's with McGriff. They did a double organ thing.
Wow.
With McGriff and Red Holloway.
Well, what year was that?
This was 2000.
That's awesome.
McGriff was in pretty rough shape because he had MS.
Right.
But it was, the thing is it was so freaking soulful, man. It was almost addictive. This was back when Yoshi's would have artists for 6 nights, 2 sets a night. I think I missed the first night, and then I think I went to 5 nights every set. And
love it. Yeah.
And
yeah, go ahead.
A friend of mine went with me, and basically we hung after and talked to Lonnie, and somehow my friend, who was much more precocious than me, found out where Lonnie was staying. And then
love this, dude.
Insisted we go to his hotel room. And Lonnie, before he went back to the hotel room, was waiting for some cake and ice cream. And they got his cake and ice cream, and then so my friend's like, all right, we're going to his hotel. And I was like, man, what the? And so he tells the concierge that he's Lonnie's nephew, and calls up the room, and he says, hey, man, can we come up and watch your ice cream melt? And Lonnie said, nah, man, but, just come back tomorrow, knock on the back door, and you can come hang. And so then, we just started hanging with him every night at Yoshi's. He was super open and just, let us hang. And then it was, the night before the last night they were playing, he's leaving. He says, so I'll see you tomorrow, to me. And I was like, man, I was 20, 21. I had, it wasn't cheap to go see a set of music at Yoshi's at that point. I was spending $25 every time for every set.
You realize that, it's so funny because I was doing that I was out in San Francisco for a month, and I think I saw McCoy or Billy Drummond. But yeah, I was doing the same. Right. We were in the same pocket, but yeah, I dig. It was off the beaten path. Yeah.
So he asked, or he says, I'll see you tomorrow, huh? I was like, man, I'm out of money, man. I can't, I don't think I can afford to come back. And he's like, man, just meet me at so-and-so time, and you can just walk in with me. So that was it, man. He walked me in, and then every time he would come to town, I would just hang with him. And I also, around the same time, had befriended Pete Falco, who's a super big proponent of jazz organ and keeping it going. And so I was hanging with Pete, and he had me, he had me come hang out with Lonnie also, or Lonnie would stay at his house sometimes. And so through Pete, I got to know Lonnie better, and then actually ended up having lessons at Pete's house, Lonnie. And with Lonnie specifically, that's how that happened. And then through Lonnie, I also met Melvin Sparks.
Oh my God! God, man. Melvin
was the same way, man. He was just open and eventually. And the other thing too is I would call them on the phone and just talk to them. Just have phone conversations, and eventually, Idris was like my guy. I mean, I would have killed somebody to play with Idris. I mean, I wanted Idris so badly because, being an organ player, to play with Idris is sort of, that's the one you want to play with. I can't really, basically. So, Idris was playing. The Boomer Room puts these shows would have, sort of all-star bands, or, just put together different combinations of musicians. And he'd been talking about hooking me up with Idris. So I made sure that Idris knew who I was. And I went over, I said hey to him, and I said, hey man, Alex from the Boomer Room is trying to hook us up. I'd love to play with you if we can make it happen. And it was so funny, man. Idris just, for whatever reason, liked my vibe, and he was like, yeah, man, yeah, we're gonna play, man. I like you. We're gonna play. I mean,
but he just felt it, man. He felt it.
Yeah, he just felt like we should play. And I thought it's amazing to me now. I think I was about 24 at the time. And it's just so funny to me looking back at it now that why would he want to play with me? I'm just some random dude talking to him at the end of his gig, but he, for whatever reason, he felt like, yeah, it'll be cool. And then we ended up playing a couple months later, I think, after that. We did a couple gigs. and that started a relationship between us. And then he ended up playing on my first record that was produced by Pete Falco. And same thing. It's just like I just really tried to make those. I'm going back to your original question. I just tried to make some of these relationships happen because I really just loved the music so much that I wanted to get to know these guys. You know, it was never like any kind of opportunistic thing. Like, oh, I want to get in with this guy because he's this guy. It was just like I really loved their music so much and wanted to be able to play it with them, you know, or play my stuff with them. And even, you know, as of last year, Lonnie and I do these double organ gigs once a year or so, where we get two Hammonds on stage, and it's always amazing I mean, it's really humbling because I always get my butt whooped badly by him. And he can play one note and just negate everything you just played. You know, I mean, that's how heavy his playing is. And that's the kind of space and dynamics he uses. Just it's beyond playing anything technical or anything like that. You can just play one note, and it's like, you know, these old sort of spiritual Sufi books about music where they talk about learning how to play one note, and it's like those guys have that, man.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
It's just,
yeah.
It's not any kind of like religious formula for them. It's just something they've done, and they're just masters of it. You know, like Lonnie can just play one note and almost make you cry. You know, because he puts so much emotion into it. And yeah, so that's you know. I need relations happen.
No, I mean, this is mind-boggling to me. Essentially, would you say at this point, this year alone, how many different instruments have you played live?
Oh, I mean, just organ, really.
Organ. I mean, so, yeah. But let's just go through them. Will Blade, you like, if you came to Tucson and, you know, I was going to put you in some, cowboy jazz group. You could play. You could play guitar. You could play. I mean, really competently.
No, I mean, I could play drums to a degree.
I think it's so cool that. Can you? How did? Because I'm like, this is so fat. First of all, are you and Lonnie kicking pedals too? Are you a pedal kicker? Because most cats don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's so badass because John Turk, who's a badass out of Oakland.
Yeah, I know John.
You know John. Okay, so you know all these guys.
Yeah, sure.
John, when John and I cooked a couple months ago, and he's like, most cats don't kick pedals. You know, it's kind of a misnomer. Can you talk about how you split your brain in half and sort of maybe just aside from the luminaries that you've had a chance to burn with, like how do you do that? Because most cats don't play bass lines, even though a lot of the audience might think they do. They do. They don't.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of a lost art in some ways because a lot of people aren't using the pedals. But you know, even Jimmy Smith and everyone up from there, you know, all his disciples, call them like McGriff and Groove Holmes and Lonnie and whoever else, Don Patterson, all. A huge part of the bass line is coming from the left hand, not the foot. But the foot gives you it kind of gives the left hand the feeling of a string being plucked. So essentially, your foot is playing the accents of the bass line, and then your foot will take over for the left hand if you need to change any of the settings on the organ. If you need to turn the Leslie on or the vibrato on or change some drawbar settings, your foot takes over. And it also just supplies dynamics with the foot. Or a lot of organ players will play pedals on a ballad so that they can play chords with their left or right hand, and then they use their foot to take over for the bass. I play a lot more pedals on the funk stuff than I do on straight ahead stuff. And Chester Thompson is someone also who plays much more pedals than most organ players. He's got ridiculous pedal chops.
I mean, I just would love. It's so you're 100% right. That dude was like ambidextrous on. I mean, he would play those organs.
Yeah.
I mean, like where stepping back in your mind's eye. 1973 Jacks on Sutter Street. I mean, clearly was the haven. Clifford Coulter. Do you know Clifford too?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so you're just one of these cats. I mean, where would Will Blades be? I mean, I just think that you would. It was either the on Broadway. Tommy Coster was playing there,
right?
And then there was the Jacks on Sutter, and you might have Merle Saunders or Groove Holmes. These guys were.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, part of it is the instrument and the fact that at the time it was being taken out of the church into the nightclub, and where does that instrument stand today? And then part of it's just the I don't know what you want to call it, the spirit, the divine, just these larger than life characters that had this ability to basically just sonically alter. Do you ever dream about where you would be in that pocket when organ trios were even drum organ duos were the thing? Where would Will Blades, if you had your pick, where would you be, and what would you be like? Who would you be playing with?
Yeah, I mean, man, that's really hard to say. Like in a lot of ways, I really, I'm like, man, I wish I grew up in this era or that era. But at the same time, it's like, man, I have the opportunity right now to like build upon what those guys did. And that's amazing to be able to have so much history there that I can learn that and then build upon that further. I mean, that's really what I'm focused on. I mean, if I had my dream band, it would definitely include, if we're talking about Will in the 70s, it would be probably Idris and Eddie Harris.
Wow, that would
be the band.
That is the Will Blades 70s dream band. That's the sickest dream band ever, dude.
I don't know who I would have on guitar. That's undecided.
Oh, we got to get that. We got to get that out of me. So let's just take it into modern day. Give me an example how you are. Talk about an inspirational moment where this year, if it occurred, where you felt like you were the torch. They're slow. Lonnie, bless him, is still cranking. I mean,
right.
A lot of cats are still here. Some are not. What was an inspirational moment for you this year that? What you just talked about, push it, like you have this opportunity now. Talk about an inspirational story this year where you felt like you were that you awakened some cats, or that you enlightened some people, or through your organ work, through that spiritual mentality of sonically creating with just a few instruments, not a big band, and ultimately You had your own Will Blades accent on it. It wasn't like you were just comping someone from the old school.
Right. Well, I mean, to be honest, some of it still comes from like some of the moments that have kind of confirmed for me, like I'm doing the right thing for myself, has come from the older guys. Like I did a show with Chester Thompson, right beforehand, and it was an organ show, a benefit. Going back to Pete Falco, one of the he has this thing called the Jazz Organ Fellowship, which is a nonprofit trying to support jazz organ education, and he does these shows. He invited a bunch of people to sit in, and pretty much every single organ player that got up right before Chester, who was the finale, every single organ player who got up before me, which was maybe about somewhere between 6 and 8 organ players, basically did the same thing. They all played something straight ahead, standard, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but they all basically did the same thing. So when I got up there, I was like, all right, I got to do something different because everyone's just doing the same thing.
Right.
And so I got up there and played a tune of mine. It was just me and a drummer. So no one else had to know the song. So I just got up there and played this sort of spacey hip hop song that I have that has some harmony in it. And after I did it, Chester says, "Yeah, man, I hear you." And that's like the ultimate compliment from an older cat is,
Wow.
"I hear you."
I
hear what you're
wow.
doing. You know,
That's
it's like,
yeah. You don't need any. That's validation right
yeah,
there. You know?
I don't need them to say anything else other than that. He just said, "Yeah, man, I hear you. Keep doing what you're doing." And so it's like, okay,
Man, this
my
is
thing.
yeah.
And not someone, I didn't get up there and try to play Jimmy Smith. I didn't get up there and try to emulate McGriff. I got up there and just tried to be me. Whether I did, that's for the judgment of other people. But I just tried to get up there and be me, and I got some confirmation from Chester. And those are the guys I'm really trying to make happy. Like if they can see that I really am respecting their history but doing my own thing, and they're into it, that's great. And I had another moment like that, not this last summer with Purdy, but the previous summer I went to Japan with him. And I had played with him before, but this was my first time with him, like, hiring me and bringing me out as part of his band. And I have this pedal that I use on my clavinet that kind of gives it this synth sound, and I'll use it with the pedals, and it sounds like I'm playing a synth bass or something like that.
Right.
And so I started doing that in the show, and I don't know what Purdy's going to think because it's a little different. And he looks over at me and goes, "I like that."
I mean, I think the lesson here for folks listening all over the world, and then that will listen back later on, is just take chances, trust your guts, trust your instincts, that once you have your constitution, once you know you have your chops and you want to do something on your own, don't be afraid to get out there and do it. I mean, I'm doing it on a different level with these guys, but it's been
Right.
so emboldening to me to go there they'll go there with me, and I can't even imagine how euphoric it must be to be on stage. Also, you happen to be tapping into, do you see like, setting aside your own professional life at this point, what is the health of the touring circuit for melodic music in the world today? How do you feel about that?
It's not easy, but I do see some bands having success with it, which occur. Like, to use an example of some people who are popular, I mean, if you look at like the success of Snarky Puppy,
Right.
whether you like their music or not, because I know it's sort of like in the jazz world almost controversial, like, people kind of love to hate them or people really love them. It's like, man, that's so encouraging. Like, do you understand that there's like, I'm sort of directing this comment towards haters.
Sure.
Is that do you understand that there's a band out there playing improvisational instrumental music and they're hugely successful? Like, that's really encouraging. That means that that you have a chance to do that as well. Like, there is an audience for the music. They just need to be hit by it. And I think you could say the same thing with like Robert Glasper and people like that. Robert's hugely popular, and I'm trying to think if there's anyone else like that. But those are probably the two biggest names that come to me right now off the top of my head. And to me, it's whether you like their music or not, it's really encouraging that there's young people out there having successful careers making instrumental music. And I know Robert has singers on some of his stuff, but man, that's really encouraging. So it's not easy out here. I'm actually on tour. I'm in Seattle right now. I'm on tour with Scott Amendola.
Oh,
we have
nice.
our duo.
Nice.
We have our duo Amendola versus Blades, and we just put out a record called Greatest Hits, and we're out here right now, and it's it's really hard. It's tough to pull audiences. We're in the Pacific Northwest where this big storm is hitting. We're scared to go out last night.
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, Blades. Let's just plan for part 2, man, because I just would like to talk to you more.
Oh, sure.
I really had a ball. I love talking to my peer group now. I mean, I'm still going back to the graybeards, but I mean, I think that there's. I just feel like as a musician, you're ahead of the curve, pushing back against sort of the electronica and the digital beats that have been forced into people's ears, and then obviously just the idea of saying, you know what, throw the labels away, throw the genres away. It's all music. It's either good or bad. And once you stop that stifling, then then it can breathe again, and then new vocabulary can be added onto it.
Sure.
And I'm just still changing. I'm still trying to evolve in my own way. So, anyway, keep burning.
Thanks, man.
And we'll cook again, man.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Jake.
Cheers, man. Later.
Talk to you.
All right, peace. And we'll be back with Glenn Clark on the Jake Feinberg Show.
Just talking to you, help me get myself together some. Knowing you're still there and waiting to love just me. And I'm here getting by, just getting high. Knowing you're still my old standby. You told me to do your best, to finish what you started. Told me loose ends tend too often to unravel. Well, I'm tired of all these loose ends. I'm tired of all this traveling. I've missed you so much. I wish we were still together, 'cause I'm getting old, and mama, you make me better. When you're still there waiting to love just me, I'm here getting by, still getting high, and knowing I'm still your standby.
Folks, welcome back inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today.